when you are fatigued and you're hungry, that is a high risk place to be for sticking to your plan. Nobody wants the long-term solution, whether it's like training or diet. We're like, I want it perfect, easy, and now. If you're in a calorie deficit every day, you are impairing what you can do.
Welcome to the TrainingPeaks CoachCast. I'm your host, Dirk Friel. In each episode, we'll sit down with industry experts to discuss coaching methodologies, the latest research, and leading tools for endurance training. Visit TrainingPeaks.com for more training and coaching resources. My guest today is Renee Eastman, who is a premier coach for CTS with over 20 years of experience coaching endurance sports. She has a master's degree in exercise science and is a NASM-certified nutrition coach. She got her start in coaching by working for USA Cycling as a sports science consultant in the lead up to the 1996 Olympics. After that, she became one of the first few coaches at Carmichael Training Systems, where she has been a full-time coach ever since. I can proudly say Renee is also a past teammate of mine on the road, where she is a 6-time Masters National Champion, both on the road and track. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Renee Eastman, thank you so much. Proud to say we were a teammate for a few years on that Natural Grocers Vitamin Cottage team. That jersey I can see in the background there behind you. So yeah, it's great to see you, and thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I was checking out the CTS blog a month or so ago and saw an awesome article that you had written. And it spoke right to me for good or bad. I think it'll definitely capture the attention of a lot of listeners because it's definitely, a big topic for a lot of athletes. And that is really, mistakes we make as we try to lose weight as athletes. I think there's a lot of, obviously, as we know, bad advice out there. And we'll kind of get into some of that maybe. But what you wrote was just spot on. It was kind of fresh, yeah. And it just hit the mark. And it was just the basic kind of mistakes that you've seen over your career. You've helped hundreds, if not thousands of athletes trying to lose weight, many, many more than I ever have. So, I also think it's a lot of athletes, it's almost their first goal. They may not tell their coach, but inside they see themselves as like being this thinner, trimmer athlete. And that is kind of their first goal, is to lose weight.
Well, it's like 97% of the population,
right.
That, the diet industry is big business, probably exaggerating a little bit, but that is, I think it's motivation for a lot of my clients to ride, period. That it's, around fitness and weight management in maybe their aspirations as an athlete kind of stemmed from that. But, and as well as I do, this is a weight dependent sport, You lose a kilo or two and your watts per kilo go up and you're up the hill a little faster.
Yeah. And, not just cycling, triathlon and running,
of course,
equally so. Now, give us a little more background in terms of your day-to-day work and experience. You're kind of diverse. You don't just coach, you work in the lab as well, correct?
Yeah, I do. So I'm my primary role is a Carmichael Training Systems coach. And I've been in almost since the beginning. This is my 21st year as a full-time coach with Carmichael Training Systems, USA Cycling Level 1. Been doing this obviously forever. I was a athlete for a little while and go in and out of athletics myself. But, as they say, those who can't do, teach.
Yeah. Or you love it and you stick with it.
Yeah. But the other roles that I do, I'm a retool bike fitter. I do that at Criterion Bikes out here. And I also run our physiology lab, which for the last 3 or 4 years was like maybe a test a month.
Wow.
But now we're like 2 or 3 tests a week.
Nice.
I've listened to your recent podcast, the Zone 2 podcast.
With Inigo?
Inigo, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's talking about how like everybody's, jumping on the zone 2 bandwagon. That's what my observation is too.
Yeah.
Whether they're recreational athletes or more serious, maybe runners, cyclists, and the like.
Yeah.
So,
well, I know decades ago it was all about your VO2 max, and now it's like, how fast can I go when I'm slow?
right. And in addition to like, I guess the coaching things, I'm an SCA, strength and conditioning specialist, and NASM nutrition coach. So, as a coach, you wear lots of hats anyway.
Yeah.
But just over the years, I've been able to do a lot of different things within the coaching realm.
Yeah. Well, speaking of today's topic, and helping athletes maintain weight, this is obviously a big topic. What kind of spurred you to write that article? Was it one thing, or any one of the? Tell us the title of the article and what got you to write it.
Yeah, the top 5 mistakes that I see cyclists make, and we could lump this to runners or triathletes or any endurance athlete. And I think it came out, I don't know, January 5th or something.
Right.
The first of the year.
Right.
I wanted to write an article in part so that I could send it to my athletes, because you get those questions all the time, but you get them in particular. I get a lot of new athletes in January, or my athletes I've continued to coach, first of the year, they're like, got to get ready for, Leadville or Steamboat or whatever they're getting ready for. So it's just very timely to do that. And, the mistakes that I flushed out are the common trip ups I see, because, it's taking a little bit of science that they hear in maybe popular literature or get, a certain idea in their head, versus like practical application of like what actually works.
Yeah.
Bridging that gap.
Well, I think some of these definitely people, it's intuitive. They see it once they're told, but it's like they need to be told, like, you realize you're doing this mistake, right? And so once they realize it, they can try and break that habit. So let's dig in. What's the very first mistake that you got there?
The first mistake is probably one of the most common mistakes. Underfueled training and subsequent overcompensation with calories after training.
Right. Overconsumption.
Right. In it could be overconsumption that like you're not getting to that calorie deficit if you're trying to lose weight, or it's not often that over consuming like putting on weight, but this is applicable to those people who are trying to lose weight. They work so hard to create a calorie deficit, torture themselves in training by going into it underfueled, diet all week long, or restrict calories all week long, light dinner on Friday night, and they might even go into the Saturday ride with a light breakfast, sometimes no breakfast because they want to be fasted,
right? And
then go out and hammer it as best they can for 3 or 4 hours on Saturday, and then once they get home, just head to the fridge.
Yeah.
And just, kind of that bottomless pit where you just feel like you can't get full, you can't get satisfied, because you created such a big deficit during the ride.
Yeah, and that intense hunger just simply overrides willpower. You still have this underlying willpower, but yet the massive hunger is there, and so you can't hold out. And so it just is creating that cycle, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that can happen like within a day too. Whether it's like just take average person on the street doing a diet and a calorie restriction. Most everybody's real good at breakfast.
Right.
Nobody's like going to the freezer and getting the Ben and Jerry's out at breakfast.
Yep.
But you go through the whole day really restricted, and then get to the evening and you've created such a big hole that a lot of times people go off the edge, whether it's within the day or within the week or within the 3 weeks. And those, binges, if you will, they really undo the progress.
Right.
The biggest predictor of overconsumption, binging, if you will, is dieting.
Right.
Because there's a concept, I don't know if you've heard of it, fatigue decision fatigue. Sorry, I got that backwards. Where we have willpower in the morning. We're rested, we're ready to tackle our day. And then all day long, we're making decisions, whether it's like what to eat or decisions at work or decisions for our kids. And then by the end of the day, we're tired. Yeah. We're physically tired. And whether that physical tired came from you trained hard, that big Saturday ride that we were talking about, or the physical tiredness comes from just your day at work and, life.
Right.
And then when you are fatigued and you're hungry, that is a high risk place to be for sticking to your plan. It's really hard to do that. Yeah. And if you constantly see yourself failing like that, is maybe be a little less aggressive with your restriction.
So it's kind of counterintuitive to say, eliminate hunger in order to lose weight. But that's really the first thing people think about is like, I need to become hungry to lose weight.
Exactly. It is, it is against people's, natural instincts. But I would propose there are times of the day you could be hungry and it work for you, like when you're going to go to sleep.
Yeah.
You don't need a lot of energy to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great time for your body to tap into stored energy. Losing weight is about giving your body an opportunity to tap into stored energy.
Yeah.
And so at periods of low activity, you're just sitting there at work, what we're doing here, or, getting ready for bed. That's a great time to tap into stored energy.
Yeah.
During your ride, when you're trying to get some fitness out of it, that's a bad time to tap into those, deep energy stores. And I don't mean like glycogen. I mean, the calorie deficit. You don't want to have a calorie deficit during your highest activity. You want to support your highest activity. Especially, if you've got a budget of whatever it is, 2,500 calories a day, if you center that around your activity,
mm-hmm.
your activity gets better, whether that's brain power at work or the quality of your workouts, to fuel, have that good meal before your workout, fuel during your workout so that you get a lot out of your workout. And then, if it's evening, late at night, that's where you can reduce your carbohydrate intake or just reduce your caloric intake, because if you're getting ready for, basically 10 or 12 hours of low activity with, evening Netflix and then going to bed, that's a great, now I'm not, I'm being, want to be cautious about like being hungry, but those are the times when you can be hungry and it's not going to hurt your day. It's not going to hurt your training.
Right. And speaking of hurting training, athletes, if their number one goal, they may not tell anybody, is to lose weight, but then they will tell people, well, I'm training for Leadville or whatever it may be. Well, then aren't you just undercutting that progress by under fueling for the actual day's training? So it's not serving the purpose for either one, losing weight, nor are you actually getting fitter. So, that's such a good point. Like if you take the very same amount of calories and just reposition them and not do the binge eating at Netflix at 8 p.m., but even it out, bringing it up to breakfast and pre-fueling, going into the workout, making the the workout more high quality, therefore achieving both goals, getting fitter and losing weight.
There's a phrase I got from working with Stacy Sims, and it's focus on preloading your workouts instead of reloading your workouts. I think our industry, especially like early 2000s when all that like glycogen uptake information come out, like the 4-to-1 carb to protein ratio and recovery drinks started becoming a thing. We as coaches and the whole industry like just crammed it down people's throats that you gotta get your glycogen window and you gotta eat right after your ride. And you gotta eat every 2 hours after your ride. Well, for most athletes, the athletes I work with are, working folks, and maybe they're training an hour a day during the week. And it's not completely exhaustive training and they're usually not doing back-to-back, like really exhaustive training or really intensive training. That if you just eat normally, or even if you didn't eat normally, if you ate a little poorly, if you will, you've got at least 24 or 48 hours till your next workout. You're going to replenish the stores by then to do the next workout. It's a completely different story if we're talking about like a, pro tour guy who's doing, a stage race and riding 5 or 6 hours a day at high intensity. That guy needs to, pay attention to his recovery nutrition more.
If you're doing an hour, 90 minutes a day, the recovery window isn't as crucial because, as you say, you have many hours to recompensate what you just burned. But if you pre-fuel, take some fuel in during the workout, there's hardly any need there to really focus on that recovery window, if you will.
I see so many athletes, or I hear so many athletes like saving their calories till after their ride. And it doesn't even make sense. Especially for that, we're talking about these athletes who have a weight loss goal, that you create this big hole and then you just fill it up again. And then you're like, I'm at the same weight I was, 2 weeks ago, because you keep on filling it back up after your ride.
And this kind of leads us into your mistake number 2, which is overemphasis on the role of cardio exercise for weight loss. So what do we, what's that mean?
You kind of alluded to it with, I'm just going to ride off all this weight or ride off, all these calories. Most of the calories that you burn during exercise are from carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is the fuel of exercise. We mentioned that I do a lot of lab testing, a lot of physiological testing where we're actually, measuring RER, carbohydrate and fat oxidation rates, where, I know you just had a great podcast on Zone 2 and a great, that alluded to, being able to oxidize fat for fuel, but where your fat max, if you will, is usually, it's going to be at most in Zone 2. And for a lot of the athletes that I see, it's just over Zone 1. Low end. I can see somebody, in our protocols, we started them at 75 or 100 watts, and go up, that they're already 50-50 at best. The few people who are what we call metabolically efficient, they might be 70-30 split at the low intensities. But by the time you're getting to about 70%, certainly 75% of threshold, you're seeing majority carbohydrates, whether it's a 50-50 split or 60-40 or 70-30. By the time you're in Zone 3, and that's just the typical, 6 zone, where Zone 3 is about 80 to 90% of FTP, you are burning more carbohydrates than fat. And most of our athletes are not doing those long 5-6 hour rides at that kind of bottom of zone 2, zone 1, where they're really able to metabolize, more fat. It is a little bit of a pitch for zone 2 training.
Right.
But that idea that, and I think it was alluded to in your last podcast, that people hear about like fat max or fat oxidation is the highest in zone 2, and they just think they're just melting away fat.
Right.
While they're riding, where, if it's a 50-50 split, half of those calories are coming from carbohydrate, and it's, if you're burning, let's say 500 calories an hour, it's 250.
Right.
But most people are riding high zone 2 or higher. Maybe you're doing intervals where you're burning more carbohydrates than fat.
Yeah, and the reason that's significant is you basically store carbohydrates, locally, in the muscles, right? And
yep.
If that's your entire workout, let's say you're doing a Zwift hard ride, you're barely tapping into your fat reserves. You're burning the local carbohydrate storage, in your muscles. You might take on a Gatorade during the ride. You take on more Gatorade, whatever it is, in your recovery window. And now you've equaled, you've now covered all the carbs you've burned. Maybe you've added more carbs and you didn't burn really any fat. And so, you really didn't tap into what you thought you were tapping into.
Right.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you burn the most athletes are going to burn the most fat outside of the exercise window.
Yeah. So the basic principle that probably most people are aware of is as exercise intensity increases, right, so does your reliance on carbohydrates. Basically, at lactate threshold or FTP, use your terminology. Above that, you're 100% carbohydrate.
Right.
And below that, some kind of split. Well, we're not exercising at all, but we are active now. But our activity level's pretty low. Our heart rates are pretty low. We don't have a high cardiovascular demand when we're just sitting here, or maybe like walking the dog, like low activity.
Right.
Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, if you will. We call it NEAT. Yeah. That's when because the intensity is so low, your body can basically be running on fat that whole time.
Yep.
And, if your, resting metabolic rate is, let's say, 1,700, 2,000 calories a day, that's the, calories that support your life,
yep.
And then you add onto it like, daily activity, which might be a factor of 10 or 20% in there. So we're talking about, the majority of that, say round it to 2,000 calories, we are doing at a very low intensity rate. And that's, 1,000, 1,500 calories that we can tap into fat. If we have a deficit, we can tap into our stored fat.
Yeah.
But, like during exercise, 500, 700 calories an hour, and we just talked about how at least half of them are fat.
Yeah.
And if you're above zone 2, most of them are carbohydrate. So that's why maybe you burn 200 or 300 calories, 400 calories from fat for your hour-long workout, but you can burn in hundreds of calories from fat through those rest of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
500 from a workout versus 2,000 from what you need to support life.
Yeah.
And if you're giving yourself an opportunity to tap into stored energy when you're not on the bike,
yeah,
those, evening, sleep, low activity times, that's when your body can run on stored fat.
Yeah.
It's not at a high rate, but it's a lot of hours of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and back to what we mentioned earlier, fuel to maximize your performance first. And
mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's in the article or not, but I think you wrote, you can't outrun a bad diet.
Yeah, I think I did use that. It's a like, even if they're just trying to manage their weight, like, stay, most everybody, almost everybody I coach, they always want to lose a couple of pounds at least. But, even if you're like holding steady, is like the quality of your calories count and the timing of your calories count when it comes to maximizing the energy you have for your training, the fuel that you have for your training, and then the like nutrient density that you need to sustain life or thrive in life. It's never the like eating the pint of ice cream or the pizza and beer before the ride. It's after the ride.
Yeah.
Where, it's not necessarily serving you, and it might not be giving you maybe if it's about energy demands, the carbohydrates you need, or if it's about, I need to be able to manage my calorie intake, that, eating higher protein, more nutrient dense carbohydrates, not those highly processed rocket fuel kind of carbohydrates, your pastas and rice and breads and things like that. It's, broccoli and kale and, less, more complex carbohydrates, more fiber content.
Yeah.
I had one guy, his big downfall was, cereal.
Yeah.
He would eat like bowls of cereal at night and things like that, which are, and we're not talking like, healthy bran flakes or anything, sugary, corn pops or whatever, that are just like straight sugar.
Right.
Basically, really simple carbohydrates that don't give you much satiation,
right,
but are really calorie dense. So you can eat a high volume of calories and not get very full.
Yeah.
You take a bowl of corn pops or whatever, and that's, at least a couple hundred calories, or you take 200 calories of broccoli, which would be like 5 or 6 cups of broccoli. And I guarantee you're going to stop eating the broccoli before you get to the 200 calories of broccoli.
Definite. And okay, moving on to mistake number 3, following bad advice. And there's all kinds of bad advice out there. So sometimes it's going to be hard to keep in mind, but what's some rules of thumb or things to look for when determining whether it might be some bad advice?
If somebody is trying to sell you something,
Okay,
that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Whether they're selling their diet, like I've seen people like, you got to do this, my diet plan,
right,
and sign up with me and I'll give you all the secrets.
Yeah.
Or if they're trying to sell you supplements, like you've got to take this supplement and that supplement and this drink and eat these things, or just if it sounds too good to be true, or it sounds really good, it probably is a gimmick or a hack. And I think one of the things I mentioned in there is appropriate diets for the population. A high fat, really low carbohydrate diet can work for a sedentary person, for them to make a calorie deficit and lose weight. And so it works, but for that population who doesn't have high activity.
Yeah.
We're endurance athletes. We just talked about how carbohydrates are the fuel for activity, and that low carbohydrate diet just isn't going to lead to long-term success there. So it's the wrong type of diet for the population.
Yeah. Like
that low carb diet. Or, the other thing is, it drives me crazy, is like, whatever, Team Sky or Team Ineos are doing. Like I remember a few years ago, Chris Froome is doing, fasted training or low carbohydrate training. Well, he's at a different place in his journey than you are. When those marginal gains of like, oh, I'm shifting my, fat metabolism a little bit by doing this low carbohydrate or fasted training. A minimal gain on for them to shift that, and it's not appropriate for the time crunched or the average Joe cyclist, because for Chris Froome or Tour de France guy, shifting that a little bit, maybe that means he has that extra 0.5% or percent at the end of his 6-hour stage.
Mm-hmm.
But for average Joe, shifting that shifting the metabolic efficiency, if you will, isn't that significant in terms of performance. Not that significant for most athletes, and it's a misconception that doing like fasted training or low carbohydrate training is effective for weight loss.
Oh yeah.
That I find that kind of like fasted training or really low, because I have athletes who've done that or want to do that. And it kind of goes back to the underfueled training, overcompensation later. Those people tend to have more difficulty staying in a calorie deficit the rest of the day, right. And their training sucked.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of taking a concept of fasted training in a misapplication of thinking that it means I'm going to lose weight.
Right.
And that's not why the pros are doing that.
Right.
We could have another conversation of is it effective or not, but that trying to shift your metabolic efficiency is not about losing weight.
Yeah. Well, you also wrote, good sound nutrition, long, I guess, healthy habits are simple and boring. And that's not exciting, but that's the truth.
Well, it's like training too, yeah. Right? What works? Oh, long Zone 2
consistent
rides,
consistent,
where you're super disciplined and doing it over and over again.
Yeah.
Super consistency, and nobody wants to hear that. I'm working with a gentleman right now who's trying to lose weight, and he's like, "Oh, it's so slow." And I'm like, "Well, how much have you lost?" He's like, "Only 6 pounds over the last 7 weeks." And I was like, "That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good job."
Yeah.
The faster it comes off, there is a correlation to like the faster it comes off is that you could do something really extreme to get that weight dropped, but there's going to be a consequence to that. Mm-hmm. And that could be overtraining or burnout, use your term, but often it means that there will be a overcompensation later, and your body compensates by putting the weight back on and maybe even gaining weight.
Yeah.
In it doesn't sell to write an article that's like eat mostly carbohydrates and make sure you're getting enough protein and eat your vegetables and it's not sexy, yeah. So it doesn't sell.
Yeah.
But like this magic pill, or method does sell.
Yeah. Well, if you're well fueled, entering workouts with the right amount of fuel, pre-fueling, all that, having a good breakfast, I feel like I can get a better quality workout, which is what we've mentioned, but that can also build muscle, right? And so the muscle itself can help you lose weight. That's going to increase your burn rate throughout the day as well, like having more muscle fiber. And so if I'm not well fueled going into the workout, I'm just not going to build as much fuel or strength, and muscle fiber. And that takes protein, and that helps me stay satiated. And I'm not going to eat, maybe all 3 bowls of cereal at night, So it's just kind of a slow progression starts to build on itself, and it kind of takes care of itself too.
Right. And it's that whole idea of whatever you do to affect that weight loss change, you're going to have to keep on doing it if you want to keep that weight loss change.
Right.
It's yeah, you're creating a calorie deficit to lose weight, but when you go back, quote, off your diet, it's, oh, I ate another spoonful of rice at dinner, or, you know, another half a sweet potato at dinner, or, you know, it's marginal
Right.
about the
Yeah.
deficits and the changes that you make. The other thing about the changes that you make, that it should fit within your lifestyle and like what you're used to doing. You know, we both live in Colorado. We probably have a similar diet. If we lived in Arkansas or Mississippi, we wouldn't maybe have the same kind of diet.
Or
I've been to the grocery store.
Always.
Right. Or, yeah, different country, you know, whatnot. Or, you know, just different cultural differences or different food preferences, you know, that some people like oatmeal and some people don't.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to do this forced routine, like I have a lot of people who are like, tell me what to eat. And I'm like, well, I can tell you what I like. I can give you some ideas, but, you know, I like overnight oats. Yeah. You know, I tell my athletes like, oh yeah, here's a recipe. And they're like, I hate that. And I'm like, well, find something else.
Yeah.
But the point is that you have to find what's going to work for you so that you can make sustainable changes.
Right.
And maybe you have to evaluate where you're willing to go. Here, case in point, we all know that alcohol isn't like the best thing for us for a whole lot of reasons. But if you're trying to manage your weight, it's not very good.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would recommend you don't drink at all if you're trying to manage your weight, because it's just empty excess calories. It messes with your glycogen storage and usage. So I have some people who are like, I just don't want to give up that beer at the end of the day. And that's okay. You know, or I want to have that bowl of ice cream at night, or I want to go to my, you know, big family dinners, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So maybe you need to adjust your weight loss goals or your ideal weight goal to what's going to fit to what you want to do and what you're like willing to do.
Right.
What fits into your like lifestyle. I think that's a whole nother topic of like, how did you come up with this weight loss goal? You know, I want to lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds or whatever. And, you know, I want to get down to, I don't know, 147 pounds, whatever. Right. And I'll ask the people, how'd you come up with that number? And it's like, oh, it's what I weighed in high school or something. Like, well, that's probably not realistic. Or just coming up with a goal that's like not necessary. Yeah. You know, that, you know, that they would have to come down to, you know, well below 10% body fat for a man to achieve that. And that might not be appropriate for a 45-year-old master's level rider with a family and kid and a job. Yep. You know, I mean, I think we all can recognize that, or I hope we can recognize that the guys at the Tour de France might not be the epitome of health. Yeah. Might not be the epitome of wellness to be that lean, you know, training that level. And I think a lot of the clients I work with, I think all the clients I work with, they're coming to the sport because it's a part of their wellness. Mm. Sure, they might have athletic goals and I want to win the race and get the championship or whatever, but it's part of a overall wellness and getting down to maybe an extreme low weight or leanness. It might not be the healthiest thing for them, and it might not improve their performance the way they think it's going to. Yeah. You know, if you know, I would take 10 watts over 2 kilos, you know, in terms of like the cost to benefit or, you know, what's going to be the most effective. Yeah. Or recoverability as well. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. And your fourth mistake is treating diet as a short-term fix.
So,
Yeah.
and we've been saying this kind of all along, like building the habits, because you need to maintain whatever changes you're going to make. It's not just a one and done 2-week kind of thing, or, that's just not going to be sustainable.
Right. I think I said this a minute ago, you could do something, I could probably, put you on some kind of like go under 100 carbs a day, really low carb, high fat diet thing, and have you lose a couple of pounds this week. But as soon as you go off it, you're not gonna sustain those changes. And it's probably not healthy either. So, nobody wants the long-term solution, whether it's like training or diet. We're like, I want it perfect, easy, and now.
Yeah.
I find the people that have the most success, they just make those small changes.
Yeah.
I like to term it like the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Most people know where in their diet they could cut those excessive calories and, not have to change their whole world upside down, but like, I, eat cookies every night, or I, binge out on beer and pizza after my Saturday ride, or, whatever your like low hanging fruit is, or, I have a, Starbucks mocha frappa, whatever, 400 calorie drink every day. Oh, just take that out.
Yeah.
And you take that out, that's, take that out, take maybe something else out, and that's 300-400 calories a day that you don't miss.
Yeah.
That it doesn't make you hungry. But if you do it month after month, all of a sudden you're a little leaner. Because that's how most people have put on the weight.
Yeah.
It's because they, started having those couple of beers at night, or they, started having the cookies here and there, or maybe they reduce their activity level, that the weight came on usually pretty slowly. And those small changes that aren't hard to make, so that you don't have to use willpower all the time. Because willpower, like any kind of, short-term extreme thing, that takes a ton of willpower to do.
Yeah.
Whether it's like, being hungry is hard. Like, I'm sure, both of us had tried different things in the past and like been hungry, and that's hard.
Yeah.
That's suffering.
Yeah.
To be hungry, or eating the stuff that you don't like kale salad, that's making yourself suffer.
Right.
So,
right. Well, I think of it like compound interest, if you have a retirement account or a 401k and you don't miss the, whatever it might be, the 2% or something you're putting away each month, it compounds over time, and you get more than 2% back, right? It says you're giving up that Frappuccino that's 450 calories, every day at 10 a.m., that might be compound interest by not actually partaking in that, or whatever. The low hanging fruit is the 2% of your salary that you're putting aside for your retirement, right? And it compounds over time, and you'll see the fruits of that, come into play.
And it also goes to those extreme measures. Willpower, it's exhausting, but what the first topic of underfueled training, overcompensation later.
Yeah.
That kind of extreme, I'm gonna lose 5 pounds in 2 weeks, or whatever the case may be. That is a predictor for weight gain.
Yeah.
After you're done that intervention.
Yeah.
Because if you're not going to plan to keep up the intervention, you're unlikely to keep the weight change.
Yeah. So that leads into the final mistake, which is taking an all or nothing approach. Meaning like, I'm going to train super hard and have a great, diet, or nothing. And if I can't train, then screw the diet.
Absolutely. it's often when somebody's starting a training plan, they're like, I want to raise my FTP by 20 watts and I want to lose 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Well, I have to ask you, which one would you like to do? Because we have to pick. I mean, if it's the short term, if it's over a 6 month or over a season, you can accomplish both.
Yeah.
But I think it's really challenging to both focus on improved fitness and dropping weight, because those are opposites. In order to improve your fitness, you need a lot of energy. You need to support your training with energy. We get energy from food, and maximize your recovery. And if you're in a calorie deficit every day, you're not maximizing your recovery. And even if you do all those things that we talked about, of managing your intake and things like that, if you're in a calorie deficit every day, you are impairing what you can do. And, the backside of that is, I think it's, so it's hard for people. Well, if you're in that calorie deficit and you're maintaining that calorie deficit, you're going to compromise on the training side, and then, ultimately have that potential for overcompensation later. Mm-hmm. So, I encourage people to kind of focus on one thing at a time, of, whether it's managing weight or improving fitness, especially when we're talking about like peak fitness. The base season, off season is a great time to focus on weight management, because your training intensity is lower. Your performance in your training isn't quite as critical, so you can, carry that calorie deficit. And back to your point about the all or nothing, is like, people want it all. They want that. I want to lose weight and increase my FTP right now. And a lot of people are either on or off their training plan.
Yeah. When
they're on their training plan, they're like eating their nutrient dense foods, and they're, maybe they're even tracking their calories, but they're real careful about what they eat, because they're thinking about, oh, this is a great fuel for the workout I'm going to do, or this is going to be a great food for recovery. And then, like you said, when they're off, then it's, donuts and pizza, and that's when I would say you want to focus on your diet, maybe even more.
Right.
Going on vacation for a week, that might be the week to really focus on your diet. That focus on I always tell people, if they're going on vacation, especially if they're worried about weight management, focus on your protein intake.
Right.
You mentioned it already, the satiety. Have your carbohydrates from those like vegetables sources, like closer to nature. You don't need the highly calorie dense carbohydrates if you're on vacation and you're, not doing a lot of activity.
Yeah.
And that's when you want to really focus on your diet and maybe be in a calorie deficit on your vacation.
Definitely.
Not very fun, but but it's much better than getting back from your vacation being, oh man, I got to double my training volume and, whack my calories in half.
Absolutely. Well, lastly, as being a coach and registered dietitian there, or not dietitian, but having helped a lot of athletes lose weight, what about accountability? I would think that would be one of the big secrets, is actually having accountability to someone like a coach to help you stay on track or determine those habits that you need to try and build in or get rid of. And do you have experience having worked with athletes, kind of holding them accountable and checking in with them?
I think checking in with them and giving them support. Yeah. I think I would rather use that word of supporting them and having being empathetic to their situation, rather than saying holding them accountable. I actually find that, like, in particular with weight, because it's such a personal thing, and there's so much emotion tied in with it for a lot of people, that too much checking in on that is actually counterproductive.
Yeah.
In my opinion. But giving them support of like, oh man, I went off the reservation, and I had a diet. He had Christmas weekend, and he's like, had the big dinner, and had a couple meals that were bigger, and now he's like feeling guilty and everything. That's not somebody I'm going to hold accountable. I'm going to be empathetic and be like, oh, you probably ate maybe 1,000 extra calories over the last 2 or 3 days. No big deal.
Yeah.
Giving somebody understanding of what really is important and what's not important. That one meal that you had. Right. That's not important. The consistency of what you do week after week and month after month is important. And, I think for each individual that I've seen have success, it comes from them, and they find what works for them. And I can give my athletes a lot of different paths that, try this, or, do this 1 or 2 things that might help them, and if those 1 or 2 things don't work, giving them new things to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, I don't know, the big takeaway for me is the simple and boring is just building the habits and getting, the low hanging fruit can go a long ways, getting rid of some of the easy stuff and making the good habits simple and boring. Consistency definitely can reap huge rewards, just like I said, with compounding interest. So any other final thoughts there, Renee, on tips for athletes?
I think, I can write this article because I've been an athlete.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it resonated with you. I wrote it because I've made all these mistakes over the years. Not, I've seen my athletes do it, but I've also done it as an athlete. And we'll go back to point 1. If you focus on fueling your training, going into your training topped up, fuel during your training so that you're, keeping your, energy up and the quality of your training up, you're going to be able to manage your calories better after your ride in the off time. So your training's going to be better supported, and then you're not going to have that big deficit after. And it does take a little bit of trust. I think you alluded to that, oh man, if I'm eating this, giant bowl of oatmeal or whatever it is before my ride. So.
Yeah, here. Definitely agree to that. So good luck to everybody out there. I appreciate all the great thoughts and tips there, Renee, and hopefully see you on the road. It'd be a great time. So yeah, I appreciate all the great advice, Renee.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks for listening to the TrainingPeaks CoachCast. Visit TrainingPeaks.com for more training and coaching resources.